Hey everybody, my name is Adam Neely. I'm here answering all of your questions about bass and music in general, so let's get started with this super fast Instagram Q&A.
Super fast Instagram Q&A.
How do you count 30-second notes? So rhythmic solfege is the practice of assigning different syllables to different subdivisions of the beat. For example, the rhythmic solfege for eighth notes would be 1 and 2 and. For triplets, it would be 1 and a 2 and a, although I've also seen it done as 1 triplet, 2 triplet. For 16th notes, it would be 1 and a 2 and a. This is super useful for communicating with other musicians about where to play within the beat. For example, on that section, the chord comes in on the E of 2. Okay, 1 E and a 2 E and a. Each 16th note, each subdivision within the measure has a name, like the E of 2. So the question is, how do you count 30-second notes? Well, the answer is you don't really. They don't have individual names. The whole rhythmic solfege thing is this ad hoc system that was used to communicate ideas that were for very specific practical purposes.
Basically, musicians would just rarely need to talk about rhythms like this one. It's just too fast and too rare, and language is built out of necessity. I've never seen the need for language to talk about, say, the 6th 30-second note. I just can't think of any time that might actually be useful, although I'm sure there's some very smart people out there on the internet who will prove me wrong.
Because none of this is standardized, there's often vigorous debate among musicians about what even to call the triplet subdivision.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out the rhythmic solfege for triplets.
Pole.
It's a pole. Tripole. The pole of 2.
It's not a tripole.
The tripole.
Chipotle.
Just
It's like Chipotle.
Chipotle.
And I should know that these discussions are happening often because I've had this exact discussion with you, Joey, the person who asked this question. We had it at 3 a.m. at the Double Down Saloon in the Lower East Side of Manhattan after a gig at Rockwood. So to finally answer your question, how to count 30-second notes, I have the solution. How to count 30-second notes. How long does it take to pack your own gear after a gig, on average? Because most of the gigs in New York City are backlined, I really just have to take my pedals and my bass off stage. And because it's so freaking frustrating to have the previous band stand forever on stage as you're trying to get on stage, I follow the main rule of gig etiquette. When you're done, get the bass off stage. How do I stand out at jams? Play the lick, but incorrectly. Where can I get the Lick t-shirt? My Teespring store. Link is in the description. How are you today, Adam? Caffeinated. It's actually pretty cold. It's a lot of caffeine though. How long does it take you to do research for your vids? For this one, none. Is there any difference in the key of E flat and D sharp? My father always say E flat and I say D sharp. So even though in our equal tempered system, E flat major and D sharp major are the same and harmonically, they aren't spelled the same. The cardinal rule of naming scales is that every letter name must be present within the scale. So it will always be A, B, C, D, E, F, G in some order, and then you'll just like add flats and sharps to each one of those note names to create whatever scale you want, like so. I don't even know what that scale is, but it is following the proper protocol. Keeping this in mind, if we take an E flat and then we build up a major scale using the formula whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, we get a scale that has 4 flats, not that bad. But if we call the note D sharp, we get a scale with 9 sharps. Remember, all scales must be spelled alphabetically in order. So if we call this note a D sharp, the next note must be some form of E, which is why even though this looks like an F, it's in fact an E sharp. So in this case, the key of D sharp, you probably don't want to deal with it. You probably just want to deal with E flat. How much bass is too much bass? There's no such thing. Why you got hair now, not the broke musician you once were? Thanks to Patreon, I can now afford to have hair. What is a half diminished chord? This. How important are college oral skills classes to a professional musician? So remember what these classes are all about. They're about training your ears. The ability to distinguish between different chords and intervals and melodies is invaluable for any musician, but especially professional ones. Even if the material might be a little bit painful and just dry, it is definitely the most useful, practically speaking, after college. How are you? Slightly more caffeinated than I was before. Why is American culture so identifiable? Because there are 300 million of us, and we are all very loud. Is autotune immoral? Think about the implications of that. Sometimes autotune is compared to steroids, musicians gaining an unfair advantage over other musicians, as if music is some kind of athletic sport where winner takes all and the winner is dominant. I feel like this is a fairly damaging way of looking at music. Autotune is just a tool that's used for aesthetic reasons, in my opinion. The same way that other tools are used, like comping, quantizing, EQ, etc. For a lot of people, that autotune aesthetic can feel sterile and lifeless, like you're not really getting anything out of the music because those subtle imperfections are the things that make music what it is. But to say that it's immoral, that's rather strange to me. I've heard that a couple times, and I'm not sure if I really agree with it. You basically have to make the argument that certain aesthetics are morally superior to others. Like, for example, listening to math rock is objectively a good thing, and listening to jazz is objectively a bad thing, which, unless you're Theodore Adorno, I'm not sure many of us would be willing to make that argument. Although who knows? How do you get it done even when you're extremely tired? It's caffeine. It's always been caffeine. Why is Paul Jackson such a fine bassist? Paul Jackson and drummer Mike Clark were a really amazing rhythm section. They played with Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters in the 70s. But if you want to check out something amazing, check out Herbie Hancock's album Flood. It's just like some of the most slinky and so good 16th note syncopation. Your mind will be blown. Ever noticed your forehead is quite big? Boy, yes. Yes, it is. Why do you lift your index finger on your fretting hand a lot? That's an interestingly specific observation, but what it is it's a means of stopping the vibration of the string to get the articulation of a staccato, like so. You notice that the finger didn't go all the way off the fretboard, because if it did, all the strings would ring out, like this. Yucky. What specific musical elements do people respond to in solos? You've made it too easy for me. As somebody who wants to get into Berklee and study composition, what do you suggest I study/do? Studying scores is a super useful way of getting inside the head of a composer. It's also super fun to read along and listen to music when you're looking at the score to it. This is something that I wish I did way more before going to school for composition, so definitely start reading and studying scores as soon as you can. Thoughts on Billie Eilish? I really like the song Bury a Friend. It's like super dark and Nine Inch Nails-ish, which is kind of weird for pop music, but I dig it. Favorite song from Yannick Gwizdala? Probably the song The Space in Between, but that's just because my band Aberdeen plays it like every gig. Do you think that there is truly bad music, or can it be considered good even if one person likes it? I think if you approach this question with any degree of rigor, what music is good and what music is bad, it falls apart very quickly. What you might find to be repulsive in music might be something that somebody else finds incredibly attractive. I think quantifying music as either good or bad misses much more interesting questions about purpose in art. What do you think of Adam Neely? Kind of a pretentious douchebag, to be honest. What chord do I use to set up an F sharp 7 C7 to F major 7 sharp 11 resolution? Probably this one. What's your favorite cheese? When I was in Berlin last December, I had quite a delicious aged Gouda. That was definitely my favorite cheese. What's the base level amount of music theory I should learn for playing in a punk band? Know where the 3 chords are on the neck. I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, that's really just all you need, and that's kind of the ethos of punk music. To use more than 3 chords is just kind of missing the point of the style, kind of like blues music too, or country music. It's all about the 3 chords and the truth. Going back to study music at 29, am I mad? Why would you ever play music? What a stupid thing to do, God. Almost as stupid as making a music YouTube channel. Favorite interval? Probably the diminished second. Thoughts on Charles Mingus as a composer and bassist? Charles Mingus is a huge inspiration to me, not only as a bass player, but also definitely as a composer. He has a certain way of creating this chaotic excitement by having multiple soloists improvise at the same time. It's so exciting to hear. If you're new to him, definitely check out his album Mingus or possibly the greatest album title of all time, Mingus, 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 Mingus. That's gonna be the name of my debut album. Neely, 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 Neely. Best AoE 2 sieve? Definitely the Aztecs. Best ways to naturally implement licks from solos into your own improvisations. So you know when you learn a new word, you just want to add it to every conversation you have? Like, say you learn the word acquiesce. Chances are you will acquiesce to the desire to insert it in every conversation.
I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request. Means no.
It kind of ends up being sort of the same thing with licks that you learn from solos. You're gonna wanna use them everywhere, but the thing that I've learned is that it's best to just kind of let that music fade into the background of your musicality. Eventually that music will come out in your playing in a way that will feel more natural and more grounded, and not like you're trying to prove that you learned somebody else's solo. What do you do when you feel you're lacking inspiration? I'm gonna quote my mentor Jim McNeely here: there is nothing quite like a deadline to get the creative juices flowing. We see the painting in your living room in almost every video. Can you talk about it? So yeah, I found this painting like in the garbage in Williamsburg, Brooklyn 6 years ago. Somebody was throwing it out and I thought it was cool, and now it hangs in my living room. There's no signature anywhere, and believe me, I've looked, and I really do want to find who painted this. So if you painted this, let me know. Please explain how musicians improvise. Think about it this way. How do you improvise a conversation extemporaneously? Do you invent new vocabulary and new language as you're having a conversation with a friend? No, you're just using the things that you've used many times before to try and have a meaningful conversation with the other person. It's the exact same thing with improvisation. You're simply recombining the things that you've already practiced and you've already learned in a way that makes sense. How much bass a day is unhealthy? You can never have too much bass. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? I have, and it's super scary. I don't wish that on anybody. It would be awesome if you do a series of world instrument notation series. Amazing work, man. There will definitely be some more world music videos in the future. I'm glad that people enjoyed the shakuhachi one. So yeah, there will be. What is your ultimate goal in life? Make music and share my love of music with other people. Also, maybe, probably someday, eat the world's best grilled cheese sandwich. What products do you use in your hair? I use Garnier Fructis style Pure Clean finishing paste. This is not an advertisement, this is literally what I use, and I literally got the recommendation for this from nobody else but Shub Saran, who is a fantastic guitar player but has even better hair. So thank you, Shub. Thank you. Sengazer's songs are stunning. How did you learn electronic music production? I'm entirely self-taught with production. I basically bought a copy of Ableton Live. Actually, let's be honest. I initially cracked a copy of Ableton Live and just started teaching myself with Tom Cosm tutorials that I found on YouTube. Honestly, it's an interesting perspective because I'm trained as an improviser and a composer, but completely self-taught as a producer. The big takeaway I had was the most important thing in all of this, in music theory and composition, as well as production and mixing and engineering, is that your ears are your greatest asset. If it sounds good, it is good. The point of the training is to help you give labels to the things that you are experiencing, which can be extremely helpful. Teaching myself mixing and production was of course a much slower process, but I learned to use my ears that way. You look like my uncle. Sorry. Favorite major 7 sharp 11 voicing. Ah, so resonant. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Finally, somebody asked the question. Do. I don't get it. How are you so cool? I'm not very cool in real life, I'm sorry to say. Drink plenty of coffee though.
Super fast instant